Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Peites, Daf Pat, what? Daf Peites, Daf 89 of Masechta Yevamos. Friends, the Maise, I have to go to Chasana. Of course, as everybody knows in Babylon Talmud, I don't usually go to anything. So, I have to shift around my schedule, and the mice I'm probably gonna have to prepare tomorrow's Daf Hayomi at the Chasana, so it's gonna be a busy Chasana. All right, well, Mazel Tov to the people getting married. What do you want me to tell you? Well, speaking of marriage, we're talking about marriage. Well, a very I bless the married couple that they should not have such a complicated marriage as the marriages that we will be discussing today. Marriages that involve wellwood and divorce documents and witnesses and all sorts of things. Let's go back to friends. To my friends who are getting married, none of that stuff, only just let's go weiter. Alright, so we're on Daf Peiches on the page. 5, 6, 7, 8 lines from the bottom or something. But two dots. Tzricha get mize umize. So we say that in the event that you have a married couple, he goes traveling, she finds out that he's in Wellwood, and then she gets remarried to somebody else, and then he comes back, and now we say it's a big mess. So tzricha get miza or miza. So we say that she needs to get a divorce document from both husbands. Now, pishlama merishin tiboy get. So I understand why she would need to get a get. Oh, that's fun! I can't wait till we learn Masechta Gittin. Get a get. El misheni amai znus palmahu. So I understand why she would need to get a get from the first fellow, because she's actually married to him, right? Meaning it was her first husband. She thought he was in Wellwood. Turns out he's not. So they're still married. So yeah, divorce document makes sense. But the second fellow, that wasn't any kind of a marriage. She was, retroactively it became clear that she was actually married to the first guy the whole time. So why do you need to get? So Omer Rafuna Gzeir Shema Yomru Gerish Zev V'Nosu Zev V'Nimtze Seishes Ish Yotze below get. So Rafuna says, well, it's because we're concerned that maybe they're going to say, friends, who's they? The Yentis. Maybe the Yentis are going to say, Gerish Zev and also Zeh, well, and it's going to be, picture it, it's going to be a long Shabbos. Right now it's the summer. Long Shabbos afternoon, a bunch of Yentis sitting together, and they're saying, by the way, did you hear that so-and-so got divorced and then married somebody else, but she didn't get a get from the second one? And they're going to say, well, it must be that, they were divorced and really she's still married to the first one and the children are mamzers. They're going to make a whole thing because they need something to talk about, and they're going to start spreading rumors. So it says, maybe the Yentis are going to be sitting around on a Shabbos afternoon, and they're going to say, Gerish Zev and also Zeh, that she got divorced from the first guy and married the second guy, and then if we're not going to give a get to her from the second guy, also the Yentis are going to say, well, she's still an Eishes Ish, and then the children are going to be mamzers, and it's a whole problem. If that's the case, Seifa de Katani, what about the Mishnah in a few days from now, Daf Tzadi Beis, that says that if they told her that her husband's in Wellwood, and then she doesn't get married, she gets betrothed, and then her husband comes back, she can go back to him and she doesn't even need to get. So also so shouldn't we be concerned about the Yentis there as well? That they're going to say that, oh well, what happened? She must have gotten a divorce from the first husband and then got Kiddushin from the second fellow, and then went back to the first one without getting a divorce from the second one. So, the Yentis are going to start spreading rumors. Lo l'boya get. So the Gemara says, no, in the Seifa also, Shitaka requires a get. Meaning when it says that she thought that her husband was in Wellwood, so that she got betrothed to somebody else, in order to go back to her first husband, she would also need a get. If that's the case, then but if that's the case, then it's machzik grushosa. Right? Meaning, if she was married to the first guy, she then understands that he was in Wellwood, so she gets married to the second guy. No, so she gets engaged to the second guy. And then if we're saying though that before going back to the first guy, she needs to get a divorce document from the second fellow, well then that's machzir grushosa, right? She was married to the first guy. She then got betrothed to a second fellow, divorced from that fellow, and then is going back to the original husband. So that's a situation of, after getting divorced from somebody else, going back to the first fellow. Right? Meaning if we're assuming that the Yentas are going to say that she got divorced from the first guy and then got engaged to the second guy, then went back to the first guy, then what does that mean for Machzor Grushoso? Well, the Yentas really have a lot of Gishmak Sugyas to talk about over here. So Rabbi Yossi ben Kippur, the Omer, Min Anisur and Asura, Min Ha'eris and Muteris, well, it's like Rabbi Yossi ben Kippur, who says that when it comes to Machzor Grushoso, that's only an issue if she mamish got married to the second fellow, but engaged, she would be able to go back. Homik Tani Seifa, Hafal Pishin Osun Lo, Achrin Get, Lo Posun Minakuna. But one second. In the Mishnah that's coming up in a few days, it says that she got betrothed to the second fellow. And then it says, Hafal Pishin Osun Lo, Achrin Get. Even though the second fellow gave her a divorce document, Lo Poslu Minakuna, she is not psula from kahuna. She could still marry a kohen. Michlad lo boya get, which clearly implies that she does not need a get. The boya get, because if she does need a get, amai lo psula minakuna, then why is she not posel from kahuna? Right? Meaning, if we're saying that in the second case, then she actually does require a get, well then she should be considered a divorcee and posel from kahuna. From the fact that we say that she's mutter to marry kohen, must mean that she clearly does not need a get in the second, in the Mishnah that's coming up by Kiddushin. No, so they'll say in the second, in the Mishnah that's coming up in a few days by Kiddushin, where we say that she could still marry a kohen, they'll say, why didn't she, why is she allowed to marry a kohen? Because it's Kiddushin Taos. Because it was just a mistake. It was just a mistake. So why don't we say in our Mishnah also that, well, she got married to the second guy by mistake as well, and therefore she shouldn't require a get. Kansur Rabbanon. So, well, in our Mishnah the rabbis are fining her. Seifa Nami the Kansur. So why don't we fine her in the Seifa as well? Reisha Da'avda Yisura Kansur, Seifa Da'avda Yisura Lo Kansur Rabbanon. Well, in the first part where she actually got married, which is like similar to adultery, so then they say, look, you need to get a divorce document. But in the second one where it's only a betrothal, so then they say, we're not going to fine you, and you can get separated, and that is that. Ein lo ksube. So the Mishnah had said that she doesn't get a ksube, right? In this case, when it says that she gets separated from both husbands and she doesn't get a ksube. How come? Well, my time at Takinu L'Rabbanan Ksuba. Well, what's the whole point of a ksuba? We're going to learn Masechta Ksubis after Masechta Yevamos. In just about another month, we're going to start Masechta Ksubis. So how can we give a marriage document at a chasana? I'm going to a chasana. So I imagine at the chasana there's going to be a marriage document. How come the fellow gives the fella a marriage document? So it won't be so simple for him to divorce her, right? If he divorces her, there's financial implications. So but in this case, we want them to get separated. So of course she's not going to get her divorce stuff. And she doesn't get, she can't claim the payers of nichsei mlug, or food payments, or garments that she can chapara, and she can't get any of that because those are things that are sort of stipulations of the marriage document, and we said the marriage document is irrelevant over here. Not lamiza umiza, if she chaptarain from either him, right, from either the first husband or from the second husband, so then she has to return a pshita. That's obvious. Well, it may have thought to say, well, if she chaptarain, so maybe then we don't have to chaptarain back. Kamash Malan, we do Chaper Arayin back. Havlad Mamzer. Friends, now we get on to a longer discussion. So, we say in the Mishnah that if she then has a child, right, if after this whole thing goes down, right, she thinks her original husband's in Wellwood, she then marries another fellow, the original husband comes back, we say she has to get divorced from both. If she then has a child subsequently with the second fellow, that child is a mamzer. Or if she even has a child subsequently from the first fellow, the child is also a mamzer. So now, the Gemara is about to ask a very long-winded question. We're going to talk about Truma and stuff, and ultimately get to a question about this case in the Mishnah about a mamzer. Now, Tanan Osam, we talk to learn over there in Masechta Trumas. We have a Mishnah. Okay, what does it say? In Tormin min atome ala tahor. So if you have produce, tahor produce, and you have to separate Truma, don't say, wait a second, I have an idea. I have some tame stuff. I have some tame produce. Why don't I just measure that up and see if maybe I could use that as my Truma? I'll just give some tame stuff to the Kohen. So he's not allowed to do that. And if he does it by accident, okay, fine, Seder. But if he does it intentionally chaps arayin tame stuff to use as Truma, it's null and void. My loss of loklum, what does it mean it's null and void? What does it mean he hasn't done anything? Chisda he said Imamish did garnished. Imamish did nothing. Even that little bit, even that measure that he separated goes back to being tevel. It's completely irrelevant. Rav Nosson bar Boshaya Omar says, Rav Nosson bar Boshaya lo also v'lo klum nesakin es hashirayim aval truma have. Rav Nosson bar Boshaya says no. What he separated, the tame stuff, is in fact truma. However, he does need to separate truma nochamo a second time on the remaining tahor stuff, right? So we had a whole bunch of grain. He needs to separate truma. He says, I have a great idea. Let me go chaparain this tame stuff as trumas. We say, look, the tame stuff counts as truma, but you still need to separate truma another time, this time with tahor stuff. Rav Chisda lo Omar ki Rav Nosson bar Boshaya. So Rav Chisda disagrees with Rav Nosson bar Boshaya, of course. The reason being, right, and what does he say? He says that no, that tame stuff is it goes back to being tevel. Kilu, it's not truma anymore. Right? You shouldn't have separated from the tame stuff. It's not even truma b'chlal. So, how come Rav Chisda says that it mamish becomes irrelevant, completely null and void? The Omer Tave Truma, because if you say that it's truma, zimnin de pashav lamafresh. Well, says Rav Chisda, that if you treat the tame stuff that you separated as truma, well then maybe sometimes he won't separate nachamo. Right? I mean, the point is that when you separate the tame stuff, we say that doesn't work. You have to separate another time from the tahor stuff. And Rav Chisda is concerned that if you say that the tame stuff technically counts as truma, they might not go back nochamo, they might not go back a second time to separate truma from the remaining tahor stuff. So therefore he says that the truma that you separated is completely null and void. But why is this any different from the following Mishnah? Rav Chisda, why is this any different from the following Mishnah? Hatorm kishois v'nimtzeis mare. If a fellow takes truma from cucumbers. Friends, do you like cucumbers? I'll tell you something. The cucumbers in Eretz Yisrael, they taste like cucumbers. V'nimtzeis mare, but if they turn out to be bitter, avatiach v'nimtzeis saruach, or if he separates truma from watermelons and it turns out to be spoiled, truma v'yachzor v'yisrum. So we say that, okay, technically it counts as truma, but you have to separate nachamo. So nachamo means a second time. Of course I like to say it because I think it's funny. So Rav Chisda, how come you're saying over here that when you separate truma from the tame stuff, we say it doesn't even count as anything, and yet we're saying that when you separate truma from these melons or the cucumbers that turn out to be no good, so we say it's truma, but you nonetheless have to separate nachamo, but it is truma. So Shogig Amazid Karamis. Rav Chisda deflects the question by saying, I'm talking about where he did it on purpose, and I'm saying it doesn't count as anything. You're asking a question about when he did it by accident, and when he did it by accident, and he separated from melons or whatever, and they turned out to be spoiled. He didn't know. Shogeg lo avad isura. When you do it by accident, you're not doing anything wrong, and therefore it technically counts as truma. Mezid kavod isura. When you do it on purpose, however, you're doing an isur, and therefore it doesn't count for jack squat. That's not Yiddish. Virami shogeg ashogeg. Now, why don't we ask a question from our Mishnah and this brisa with regard to shogeg, making a mistake. Hacha katani b'shogeg chumasu chuma, because after all, in our Mishnah it says that if you separate from the tamei stuff for the tahor stuff, so it counts as truma. Hasam katani truma v'yachzor v'yisrom, and yet by the melons it says that sure it counts as truma, but you still have to separate truma nachamo by the melons. So asam shogeg karev lemezid tibayle lemita'ami. So the Gemara says, well, there it's not exactly super shogeg. By the melons and the cucumbers, it's not exactly extremely mistaken, because he could have tasted it first before he gave it to the kohen to make sure that what he was separating was actually good stuff. Okay, fine, and therefore, I guess you're probably not going to taste the truma, because that you're not allowed to do that. I assume you're not allowed to do that, even to taste it. But anyways, you could have checked it first, and maybe eat from the rest of the stuff that's no longer tevel. Anyways, so you should have checked it out, and that's why he needs to separate nachamo. Okay, the rami mezid amezid. But why? But also you can ask the situation of mezid. It says over here, right, when you separate truma tmeya on purpose, so we say it counts as jack squat. And yet we learn in a Mishnah that atori mishe'ein nakuv al nakuv. That, well, friends, remember otzitz nakuv and otzitz she'einu nakuv? Otzitz nakuv means a plant pot with a hole in it. Oh, that's interesting. We're talking about pots on the peites of Yevamos. Pot. Wow. Atori mishe'ein nakuv al nakuv. So an otzitz nakuv is a pot with a hole in it. So if it has a hole in it, it's considered connected to the ground. And if it's connected to the ground, so you're chayav in truma midoraisa. Now, if you have a pot that doesn't have a hole in it, so it's completely separate from the ground, so then it's only chayav in truma midorabon. So atori mishe'ein nakuv al nakuv. So if you have a plant or a pot that has a hole in it, i.e. it's chayav truma midoraisa, and you say, oh, here's this stuff from a planter that does not have a hole in it, an otzitz she'eino nakuv, which is only chayav midirabanan, trume v'yachzor v'yisrom, so we say it counts as trume, but you have to do it nachamo. And yet we said in our situation that when you do it on purpose, it counts as jack squat. So b'treimoni tzayis v'chadmona lo tzayis. So we say, yeah, but that's because when you have the two planters and we say, look, it doesn't count, you have to do it again, so then, or whatever, it's technically truma, but you have to do it again. So because they're two separate entities, you'll go and say, okay, I guess what I did didn't work. I have to separate from, the actual, plant that needs to be separated from. However, in our case, when you have all of the all the stuff together and you separate from the tamei stuff and the tahor stuff, we say you have to do it nachamol, you can say, but I already did it one time. It's the same stuff. So therefore, that's why we say, it doesn't count for jack squat, to make sure that you're actually going to do it again. But by the separate pots, we assume that you'll do it again nonetheless. I'm shtickle tired, it's like in the middle of the day. What time is it? 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock is kind of the middle of the day in some ways. I'm shtickle tired. I guess I'm always tired. Alright. What should I wear to this chasana? I haven't been to chasana in so long. Should I wear my Babylon Talmud cap? I don't know, I guess I'll try it out, see if it looks formal enough. I guess. Try it out. We'll see what it looks like. I don't know, I gotta figure out what I'm gonna wear. That's why I'm in a rush. That's why I have to, probably not gonna finish the daf, because, I have a ride that's leaving in 45 minutes. And I have to finish recording Babylon Talmud, find something to wear, and go walk over to some meeting spot where I'm going to get a trim. So I got a lot of stuff to do in the next 45 minutes. Let's go weiter. So, Reb Nosson bar Bushaya, the Omar, and according to Reb Nosson bar Bushaya, who said, Lo asav lo klum l'sakin shirayim, that, let's go weiter about Truma Have, but it's Truma, right? Meaning Reb Nosson bar Bushaya, his opinion was that when you separate the Tameh stuff, so, right, you have all this stuff that you have to separate Truma and you separate Tameh stuff. So, Reb Nosson bar Bushaya says that the Tameh stuff is technically Truma. That's technically Truma, but you just have to separate Nochamo. So, why is that different than the following Mishnah? Nakuv al she'ein nakuv. So, if you have a pot that does not have a hole in it, so it's only chayiv in Truma midir. And then you have another pot that has a hole in it, and therefore it's chayiv in Truma midoraisa, and you separate from the deoraisa stuff for the derabanan stuff. So you have to separate Truma from the derabanan stuff, but you separate from the pot with the hole in it as Truma. Now the thing is, that doesn't really work, right? We're talking about separating Truma derabanan, and you're using stuff that's chayiv in Truma midoraisa. It remains tevel, and you're not really separating anything. It's tevel. So Trumasa Truma velo sochal. So it's funny, it says Trumasa Truma, like in some ways we treat it as Truma, but this is really the more important part. Velo sochal, the kohen cannot actually eat it because it's tevel. You have to separate Trumas and Maisers before you'll be able to eat it. It's considered tevel. So here we're separating the stuff that you shouldn't be separating, and we're not considering it Truma at all. So shiny hacha, so it's different in our case with the Truma Tameya and the Truma Tahora, to midoraisa Truma Ma'al, because technically speaking, this Truma, the Truma Tameya that you separated is in fact midoraisa Truma. How do I know that when you separate from the bad stuff on the good stuff, it's still considered Truma? So in this case, when you separate the Tameh stuff, it's technically considered Truma. That, well, it says that when you separate Truma, don't do anything that would be considered a sin. Meaning, separate from the Torah stuff. Don't separate from the Tameh stuff, because if you separate from the Tameh stuff, you're making a mess. Now, if it doesn't become holy, if separating from the Tameh stuff, it just doesn't do anything at all, so what sin are you doing? You're just not doing anything. So rather, no, it must be that when you separate from the Tameh stuff, it actually is technically Truma, but it's bad Truma. And therefore, we're saying don't do it. But it does technically count as Truma. Rabba says to Rav Chizda. So remember, Rav Chizda had said that when you separate the Tameh Truma, it's not considered Truma at all. It's not considered Truma at all, and that's because if we consider it to be Truma, you might not then separate it a second time from the rest of the stuff. And we need you to do that. So we say, look, if we just say it's not Truma at all, so then, if we say that it's just not Truma at all, so then you'll be motivated to separate, from the Torah stuff, because you haven't yet separated Truma. So Amal Rabba Rav Chizda says, Rabba to Rav Chizda, L'didach de Omar, Lo asav lo klum, kol ikr. According to Rav Chizda, that when it says that if you separate the Tameh stuff, so you haven't done anything at all, that even the measure that you had separated goes back to being tevel, it's completely irrelevant and null and void. My time, how come? Why? Because we're concerned that if he separates, if we consider it to be Truma, then he might not separate a second time for the rest of the stuff. Do we have a precedent for such a thing that midoraisa is considered Truma, but out of concern that maybe you're not going to separate Nochamo for the rest of the stuff, we're going to say that it's not Truma, even though midoraisa it is Truma? How can you do that? Can Bezdin say that out of their concern, right, out of their concern that he's not going to separate it a second time, is Bezdin able to uproot something in the Torah to say that this Truma is actually not Truma? So Rav Chizda responds to Abba, Vadlo Tizbra, wait a second. I don't know what, you don't agree with that? We learn in the Mishnah of Havolod Mamzer. Friends, this is the tie-in back to our Mishnah. What do we say in our Mishnah? You have this woman and she's married. Her husband goes away. She thinks that he went to Wellwood. She then gets married to a second fellow. Her husband then comes back turns out he wasn't in Wellwood. So we say, okay, so if she has now a baby from the second one, so that child is a mamzer. Okay, I understand, because she was married, she was married to another man at the time. But what about the first husband? We say that the first husband is a mom, right? The child would be a mamzer as well. They have to get divorced. They can't have a child together. The child would be a mamzer. Now, that's kind of right now. One says, so Bishlama Misheni mamzer. So I understand why, if she has a child from the second husband, it would be a mamzer, because she had a child with the second husband when she was still married to the first husband. But why would the child be a mamzer from the first husband? Ishtohi Visoma al Yehu. She's right there married, and therefore the child is midoraise a Yisrael. Because Sharina le b'mamzeres, and if you consider the child to be a mamzer, well, then you're going to say that he's allowed to marry a mamzeres. Now, the fact of the matter is that this kid is a Yisrael, and Yisrael is not allowed to marry a mamzeres. So here we see that the rabbis are saying that they need to get divorced, and if they have a child, that child is going to be a mamzer and would be permitted to marry a mamzeres, even though midoraisa he's a Yisrael and not allowed to marry a mamzeres. So says Rav Chizi, see, we do have precedent that Bezdin can uproot things in the Torah. Omar le, to which Rabbi says, Achi Omar Shmuel, but Shmuel says also b'mamzeres, that no. So Rabbi responds to Rav Chizde, he says, come on, that's not a good proof. Shmuel said that this child would not be allowed to marry a mamzeres. V'chen ki also Rav and Omar Rabbi Yochanan also b'mamzeres. Also, when Ravin came, he said the name of Rabbi Yochanan that he's also mamzeres. V'amai kar le mamzer. Then why do you call the child a mamzer? Lo also b'bas Yisrael. Say that he's not allowed to marry a bas Yisrael either. Meaning, in this case, the first husband, if they have a child, yes, Meikar Adin, that child is a Yisrael, and therefore, as a Yisrael, the child would not be allowed to marry a mamzeres. But we're saying that he's a mamzer to the extent that he also cannot marry a bas Yisrael. He basically can't marry anybody in this case. But we're not uprooting anything in the Torah. We're not saying that now he's allowed to marry a mamzeres. No. He's not. Fine. I think we're going to stop it over here, even though, so we still have about half a moment to go on Daf Pei Tesima Beis, but we're going to stop over here because I have to get to a chasana. Friends, peace out.